you. I figured that I wrote a show and tell sermon, I guess. When I was ordained in 2006 by Montreal Ottawa Conference, they offered me a personalized chalice made by a local potter. And as nice as the thought was, I did not exactly what to do with the chalice. Well, I know what to do with a chalice, okay, don't worry. I did not know what to do with that chalice. So quite rapidly, it ended up on the shelf in my mother's apartment because I saw in that chalice a symbol of my ordination, and I wanted to give her something because for all the help and the encouragement she offered me throughout all this journey. My mother passed away, and the chalice came back to my place, and one day it broke. And I could not, well, let's be honest here, my wife could not glue it back together because all the small pieces, and we did not find it all. And I was not sure what to do with a broken chalice. So I kept it in my office. And interestingly, with time, I began to see something else into it. It became a symbol of how ministry could be difficult, how life is fragile. And I began to look at this apparently completely useless object from a different point of view. This broken chalice gained unexpected new meaning. Today, the lectionary offers us a passage from the book of Jeremiah, in which the prophet is asked to go down to the potter's house. And around the world today, this morning, many churches have set up a potter's wheel in their sanctuary. Clay has been brought in, and rags have been thrown down on the floor. And as the minister is ready to begin his or her sermon, a potter would come to the front and start practicing his or her art with water, clay, and knives, and wires, and their hands. We don't have this morning. I know usually people like those kind of things, but sorry. Well, maybe I should have brought the movie Ghost, with Demi Moore and Patrick Swayze. The women know what I'm talking about, eh? Yeah. I have a sermon. In the Bible, the image of the potter, a potter working the clay, is found in several places. On top of the book of Jeremiah, it's also found in Isaiah and Ecclesiasticus and in Paul's letter to the Romans. In the book of Genesis, when God formed the first human being out of the dust of the ground, well, the original Hebrew text use a verb that is essentially the same used for a potter working the clay. And these multiple recurrence of this very powerful concept inspired Christians throughout the centuries. For example, Down to the Potter's House was the theme chosen by the United Church of Canada, the 40th General Council of the United Church of Canada. Not the one that I almost lost my mind with, but the one in 2009 in Kelowna. Somehow the image of a potter seems to speak to the people. So one day the Holy One came to Jeremiah and ordered him to go down to the house of a potter, and there, says God, I will let hear my words. So Jeremiah went on his way and probably found a potter quite easily, because every village and every little town back then would have at least one of them. You see, long before the invention of the Tupperware, people used to keep stuff in their jar of clay, And if today we tend to consider potters as very skillful artists, they were mostly seen as craft people producing essential household objects in Jeremiah's time. So Jeremiah arrived at the destination. He found a man sitting at his wheel. And like any potter, he had worked hard to make the clay malleable, and he had to be very careful with what he's doing, because too much or too little pressure applied can spoil everything. And when this happened, well, the potter simply collapsed the vessel, compressed the clay, remix it, and put it back on the wheel to make another pot. The clay is not lost. It is worked and reworked into something else, this time to the proper shape or the proper size as it felt good for the potter to do. Nothing is waste. Nothing is a complete failure. And then the Holy One declared to Jeremiah, "Can I not do with you, O house of Israel, just as the potter has done? Just as the clay in the hands of the potter, so are you are in my hand, O house of Israel." To be told that we are like clay in the hands of God is a wonderful message of hope. Despite all our imperfection, our mistakes, we are always often forgiveness and opportunity to begin again, to start again, to change our behavior, and our ways. We have another chance in life. God is like a potter laboring over us, even when things seem to be difficult, even when we're feeling attacked, even when we are going through a very difficult time. God's hand is all around us, seeking to do a wonderful thing for us, seeking to make us vessels of God's love and God's beauty, seeking to help us to become what we were created to be. And the potter can work and rework the clay almost indefinitely before it's glazed and it's fired. However, some might ask the question, what happened to a vessel or a pot which has not turned out as expected after it was glazed, after it was fired? Because the clay is not malleable anymore. It cannot return on the wheel to be reworked. So what happened? Does the potter try to convince oneself that no, there's no mistake and ought to use it nevertheless? Or does the potter what? Throw it away, discard it, smash it? This might be a strange question, maybe for us, but still it's relevant. It's relevant for us, for our congregation, for our church as a whole. Because we are well aware of all our mistakes of the past. We could dress a long, long list of everything we have done wrong as an institution, as a congregation, or as human beings. And during the last few years, we, as a church, work hard to apologize to those who we have wronged. We work and rework upon ourselves and our structure until we have the feeling that we created something better. And now we might have the impression that we figured it out. We took our vessel and we're ready to glaze it, to fire it. The community is formed, the structure guiding our lives together are fixed. That's the way we're doing things here has become some kind of an acceptable answer. But what happened when we notice that something is not quite working as expected, or even worse, some would say, where someone else show us an imperfection or a flaw? Do we say, oh, we cannot change anything? No. Are we trying to convince ourselves that even an imperfect vessel is better than no vessel at all? Or are we trying to work on it, taking the chance to maybe repair it, maybe breaking it in the process? Are we afraid? Is it fear guiding our decision? For many years, I did not understand why a museum would choose to keep and display one object over another, especially when it comes to contemporary art. I could not get around or get the big deal about a panel with three columns of color hanging on the wall. And after many attempts, some very patient soul, blessed be their heart, helped me to understand that what is on display, the painting, the object, is not necessarily art, but a work of art. What is important is maybe a little less the object itself than the whole artistic project and journey leading to it. And in many ways, I think the same could be said about our churches. Because we have this impulse to see in our buildings, in our congregation, in our institution, an end in itself, when they are supposed to be the visible and physical representation of our faith, of our beliefs, of our spirituality. Too often we think that we have found a good formula, a good structure, a good tradition, a good theology, and we want to glaze it, we want to fire it so we can keep it forever. We do not want to change it at any cost, regardless if we discover some flaw in it. And yet, sometimes, some parts are broken. And on other times, some parts need to be broken if we want to discover new perspective and new understanding of our world. And this prospect might be frightening for some of us who prefer stability, continuity, assurance. However, as a potter who does not make only one single vessel during one's lifetime and then put it on the shelf and look at it for the rest of eternity, or as a potter who does not always repeat exactly the same pattern over and over and over and over, we are invited to accept that change, evolution, being reshaped, are part of this existence, are part of our world. We are called to reconsider the attachment we have towards certain object, certain structure, certain institution, so we can begin to envision what we could be together in the future if we are ready to open our minds to new possibilities. Things are continuously changing. We break some things. Sometimes we lose what is important to us. Sometimes we're forced to reconsider previous assumption. Ultimately, nothing stays the same forever. We could be sad and depressed about it, or we can try to embrace it as much as we can. Because without those events, those breaking moments, we will never see the world from a different point of view. So we should not be afraid of change, of transformation, or even smashing what is not useful anymore. Because God, who is constantly creating and recreating, is present in our lives, always inviting us to start again and again and again, to learn something new and different, and to become better human beings. So thanks be to God, and amen.